ex allievi della quella che io ho considerato la nostra università, nostra italo-somala naturalmente, abbiano avuto l'opportunità e l'occasione di proseguire i loro studi e la loro formazione in prestigiosissime università degli Stati Uniti. Infatti Abduweli è stato, ha conseguito il suo MA a Harvard, il suo PhD all'Università di George Mason University, e quindi attualmente è Associate Professor alla Niagara University di New York State. Queste le sue credenziali, diciamo così, accademiche, in realtà poi il suo compito in questo momento è quello di lavorare per la Somalia, cercando insieme agli altri responsabili membri del suo governo di risolvere quelli che noi conosciamo i problemi molto seri di questo paese. Spero che qui in Italia abbia trovato e trovi ancora, domani incontrerà il nostro primo ministro, trovi nel mondo politico italiano il sostegno e l'appoggio che noi tutti ci auguriamo che l'Italia voglia continuare a dare alla Somalia. Questa sera parlerà per noi sul tema Good Institutions are a Prerequisite for a Better Somalia. Quindi non mi trattengo oltre e do la parola al Primo Ministro. Grazie per essere qui.
Thank you, Professor. It's a pleasure to be here with you in this premier institution. And today, I will not talk about piracy. I will not talk about famine. And I will not talk about the Shabab. I will talk about institutions, the importance of institutions for a better Somalia. Somalia is where it's today because of the collapse of the institutional framework that should have guided that country. So we say in Somalia, it's all about institutions. The institutional settings within which economic policies are formulated are of crucial importance, and the quality of these institutions can be the primary source of the differences among countries. Poor institutions interfere with economic growth by inducing economic agents to engage in redistributive politics rather than economic activity with lower economic returns. Poor institutions encourage diversion of production and therefore reduces the level of economic activity. Many countries that are rich in natural resources, such as Nigeria, Trinidad, and Venezuela, for example, have done badly in terms of economic growth because natural resources suffer from a common pool problem. In the absence of well-defined and protected property rights, natural resources can be exploited by a number of political interest groups. Poor countries tend to have unreliable legal systems, corrupt governments, and insecure property rights. The lack of the security of property rights also prevents poor countries from acquiring the badly needed advanced, expensive technology available in developing countries. So the question is, does the nature of the political regime matter, or is it all about institutions? Institutional scholars argue that the quality of institutions matter more than the type and the nature of the political regime. They suggest that institutions will have a lasting impact irrespective of the country's political orientation. Dictatorships with good institutions, such as Singapore and Chile under Pinochet, succeeded economically, while many democracies are economically backward. Natural resource-rich countries, such as Nigeria, Venezuela, for example, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, have done poorly in terms of economic growth, while resource-poor countries in East Asia, such as Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea, grew fast in the past 80 years. For example, South Korea had the same per capita income as Congo in the 1960s. Today, it is 10 times richer. And all indications suggest that it's all about the characteristics of their respective institutions. Although the quality of institutions can be of utmost importance in a country's economic trajectory, it might also be the case that the type of the political regime is also as important as institutions. There is a voluminous literature that democracy and all that it entails is a prerequisite for economic development. The proposition that democracy promoted growth is based on the premise that democratic regimes provide constitutional guarantees of the protection of property rights, a legal framework that facilitates exchange and enforce contracts. Proponents of this idea suggest that democratic processes and the existence of fundamental civil rights and political freedoms create an environment conducive to investment and the requisite incentives to undertake risky economic activity. The economic collapse of the socialist totalitarian regimes in the early 1990s and their shift toward democratic free market system supports this idea. Now, the question is, as good institutions are a prerequisite for a better Somalia. It's very likely that the transition in Somalia from authoritarianism and civil war to a broad-based democracy will not be easy. How successful Somalia will be will depend on the institutions established and the policies followed. Although many external factors outside the control of the Somalis political elites will affect the outcome, I will emphasize those institutions and economic policies which I think are under the purview of the Somalia's political leaders and which I think will contribute to the consolidation of the transition and to good economic and political performance. Chief among them are political freedom, civil liberty, economic freedom, judicial efficiency, the rule of law, political credibility, stable economic policies, transparent political system, decentralization of power, and accountable and responsive state institutions. I believe guaranteeing freedom, formulating credible and stable policies, and establishing transparent, decentralized, and accountable state institutions will determine the outcome of Somalia's political and economic future. I will start with the rule of law. Somalia was lacking the rule of law for the last 21 years. It became the center of lawlessness, anarchy, and violence. The rule of law is important for Somalia's future and to take Somalia to the next level. The rule of law in any given country reflects the degree to which the citizens of that country are willing to accept the established institutions to make and implement laws. It also indicates the extent to which countries have sound political institutions, strong courts, and orderly succession of powers. A good measure of how reliable a country's legal system is the extent to which a government enforces the rules codified in their charters and constitutions. Second, freedom. The most important thing that a government can give to its own people is to protect and endow its own people with their God-given freedoms. Of fundamental importance are political freedom and civil liberty. Whether a government provides political freedom to its citizens will depend on how it responds to the following questions. Is the head of the state elected through free and fair election? Are legislative representatives, means the parliament, elected through free and fair elections? Are there fair electoral laws, fair polling, and honest tabulation of ballots? Do the people organize freely in different political parties or other political groupings of their choice? Is there significant opposition vote and realistic possibility to gain power through elections? Does the country have the right of self-determination and its citizens free from any kind of domination? Do cultural, ethnic, religious, and other minority groups have reasonable self-determination? Is the political power really decentralized? In addition to the political freedoms, the civil liberties of the citizens should. Is there a protection from imprisonment and exile? Are there free and independent media, literature, and other cultural expressions? Are there free trade unions and peasant organizations or equivalents? Are there free professional and other private organizations? Are there free business cooperatives? Are there free religious institutions? Are there personal and social freedoms such as freedom of movement, choice of residence, and choice of citizens to engage of marriage? Is there equality of opportunity? And finally, is there a freedom from extreme government indifference and corruption? Economic policy. Another important factor that affects the success of the country's future state is the quality of the government's economic policies, fiscal, monetary, and trade policies. Will affect the economic environment in which economic activity takes place. One of the fiscal parameters that are considered to have a negative impact on development is the size of the government. Negative. It is therefore necessary to have a small but efficient government. This will minimize the habit of depending the government for the things that people can do for themselves. If you create a government big enough to give you everything you need, it will be a government big enough to take everything you have. The future governments of Somalia should not fall into the trap that the size of your bureaucracy is a reflection of your power. How about trade policy? The Somali economy should be open